The sterile hum of the boardroom, usually a symphony of Amelia Thorne's absolute control, faded into an almost unbearable silence as her gaze snagged on the small, grainy photograph clutched in her assistant's trembling hand. It wasn't a document of market projections or a schematic for the next generation of neural interfaces, but something far more potent, far more disarming, a raw, unfiltered snapshot. In it, her daughter, Lily, her precious 10-year-old Lily, whose world was a tapestry woven in silence, was smiling. Not the polite, hesitant curve of the lips she sometimes offered to placate the endless stream of therapists, nor the brief, almost imperceptible flicker that occasionally graced her features when engrossed in a favorite book. This was a genuine, radiant, utterly incandescent smile, a burst of pure, no unadulterated joy that stretched from ear to ear, illuminating her entire face with a light Amelia hadn't witnessed in years, perhaps ever. The weight of Thorne Innovations, a multi-billion-dollar empire built on her relentless ambition and strategic brilliance, suddenly felt like a feather compared to the monumental gravity of that single, captured moment. Amelia Thorne, a woman who commanded respect with a single glance and dismantled competitors with surgical precision, felt a choked gasp catch in her throat, her meticulously constructed composure crumbling to dust around her. She was, for the first time in her formidable career, utterly, irrevocably speechless. This wasn't just a smile, it was a revelation, a profound, seismic shift in a landscape Amelia had long considered barren. For a decade, Lily's life had been largely a quiet struggle, a delicate dance with the profound silence that enveloped her. Born with profound sensorineural hearing loss, Lily existed in a world without sound, a world Amelia, despite all her resources and unwavering love, found herself constantly battling to penetrate. The sheer, overwhelming joy emanating from Lily in that photograph was a stark, almost painful contrast to the quiet resignation that had become Lily's default expression, a quietness that had settled not just on her face, but deep within Amelia's own heart, a constant, dull ache that no corporate triumph could ever soothe. This was a smile born of true connection, a bridge built across the chasm of silence that Amelia had, despite every conceivable effort and expenditure, failed to construct. It was a smile that promised a breakthrough, hinting at a magic she thought unattainable, a miracle that someone else, an unknown entity, had managed to conjure where she had only ever encountered impenetrable walls. The very air in the boardroom, thick with the scent of ambition and power, seemed to vibrate with the sheer impossibility of what she was witnessing. Amelia Thorne was not merely the CEO of Thorne Innovations. She was Thorne Innovations. From a nascent startup to a global powerhouse in cutting-edge technology, her trajectory had been meteoric, a testament to her ruthless intellect and unyielding resolve. Her days were a relentless blur of early morning calls to Tokyo, midday negotiations in London via secure video links, and late-night strategy sessions dissecting the future of artificial intelligence or quantum computing. Hence, she lived in a penthouse suite overlooking the glittering sprawl of the city, a testament to her singular focus and boundless drive. Her wardrobe was a carefully curated collection of power suits, her diet an almost scientific regimen designed for peak performance, and her personal life. Well, her personal life was Lily. Lily was the quiet anchor in her storm-tossed existence, the one inviolable space where the relentless demands of her empire had to yield, however briefly. Yet, even there in the sanctuary of their opulent apartment, a profound sadness often permeated the silence. Lily, a bright, inquisitive child with eyes like deep pools of thoughtful intelligence, lived in a world where spoken words were meaningless vibrations, where the melody of a bird's song or the comforting rhythm of a parent's voice were utterly alien concepts. Her deafness wasn't just a medical diagnosis, it was the defining characteristic of her young life, shaping every interaction, coloring every moment. Amelia had poured millions into specialists, cutting-edge therapies, experimental cochlear implants that promised miracles but delivered only partial, frustrating results. and countless hours with sign language tutors. She had learned American Sign Language, ASL, herself, diligently, meticulously, often practicing signs late into the night after endless workdays, her fingers aching, her mind weary, all in a desperate bid to communicate, to truly connect with her daughter. But Lily, perhaps overwhelmed by the constant pressure to fix her, or perhaps simply by her own deeply introverted nature, remained largely withdrawn. Her communication, even in ASL, was often sparse, but functional rather than expressive. The emotional distance, born of a mother's frantic efforts and a child's quiet retreat, had grown into a palpable, aching void between them. Lily's world was a silent fortress, and Amelia, for all her power, remained perpetually outside its walls, knocking, pleading, yearning for entry. The photograph, now resting on the polished mahogany table, seemed to hum with an unasked question. How? How had this profound joy been elicited? Who was this person standing just out of frame, the architect of such an extraordinary moment? Amelia's mind, usually a fortress of logic and strategic foresight, raced with a chaotic mix of elation and a bewildering sense of professional inadequacy. She, the woman who could single-handedly orchestrate a hostile takeover or navigate the treacherous waters of international diplomacy, had been utterly flummoxed by the simplest, most fundamental human need, to make her own child genuinely happy. This new, unknown individual had achieved what an army of highly paid experts and a mother's boundless love had failed to accomplish. The identity of this mysterious benefactor, this catalyst for Lily's pure joy, became an immediate, all-consuming obsession, eclipsing pending mergers, quarterly reports, and global market trends. The open loop of who and how resonated with an urgency far greater than any business challenge she had ever faced. Life for Amelia, before this jarring revelation, was a relentless, perfectly choreographed ballet of deadlines, demands, and decisive actions. Her personal assistant, Sarah, a woman whose loyalty was only matched by her unflappable efficiency, often found Amelia still at her desk at midnight, the city lights painting geometric patterns on the vast glass walls of her office. Sundays, theoretically Lily's day, were often punctuated by urgent calls or last-minute crisis management. Guilt was a constant, unwelcome companion, a subtle undertow beneath the surface of her polished exterior. She would watch Lily play in their meticulously landscaped garden, a quiet, solitary figure amidst the vibrant flora, and feel a sharp pang. Lily rarely invited interaction, preferring the company of her elaborate dollhouses or the tactile exploration of different textures. Amelia would try. She would sit beside her, signing simple sentences, asking about her day, attempting to engage. Often, Lily would respond with a perfunctory sign or a brief, almost imperceptible nod before returning to her private world. Amelia had tried playdates, enrolled Lily in specialized art classes, even hired a dedicated expressive arts therapist. But nothing seemed to truly unlock the emotional dam that held Lily's joy captive. The specialist had gently suggested that Lily might be on the spectrum, a possibility Amelia vehemently rejected in her heart, even as a part of her wondered if it explained the profound disconnect. She simply wanted to reach her child, to truly know her. A month prior, overwhelmed by a particularly brutal week of corporate espionage and a looming product launch, Amelia had made an uncharacteristic, impulsive decision. Instead of another weekend of structured play with a new, highly recommended child psychologist, she decided to take Lily to the Wonder Lab, a newly opened interactive science museum specifically designed with multi-sensory exhibits. It was a chaotic, vibrant place, filled with the excited shrieks of children, sounds that Lily, thankfully, could not hear. Amelia had hoped the tactile and visual stimuli might spark something, anything in Lily's quiet world. They navigated through rooms filled with swirling light projections, touch-sensitive walls that pulsed with color, and intricate mechanical displays. Lily, usually reserved, showed a flicker of interest in an exhibit demonstrating the principles of fluid dynamics, her small hands tracing the patterns of colored liquid behind a thick glass panel. Amelia watched her, a familiar ache blooming in her chest, wishing she could share the experience with her daughter, nay, wishing she could hear Lily laugh. It was in the Innovation Cafe, a brightly lit, bustling space within the museum, that the seed of this bewildering photograph was sown. Amelia, exhausted but trying to project an air of calm engagement, had taken Lily there for a promised ice cream. The cafe was predictably crowded, a cacophony of clanking dishes and excited chatter. Amelia found a small, relatively secluded table near a large window overlooking an urban park. Lily, clutching her double-scoop vanilla cone, sat quietly observing the bustling scene with an almost clinical detachment. Amelia, momentarily distracted by an urgent email that Sarah had flagged as critical, had pulled out her phone, only glancing up occasionally to check on Lily. It was then, amidst the ordinary chaos of a public space, that the extraordinary had begun to unfold. The scene, replayed in Amelia's mind now, felt like a slow-motion dream. From her peripheral vision, Amelia registered a tall, lean figure approaching their table. He was a man with a kind, open face, weathered around the eyes, carrying a tray with 2 coffees and a small, brightly colored juice box. He wore simple, functional clothes, a worn denim shirt and dark trousers, a stark contrast to the tailored elegance Amelia herself embodied. He had stopped, seemingly, to retrieve a fallen toy from beneath the table next to theirs. As he knelt, his eyes, a warm, earthy brown, met Lily's. And then he did something utterly unexpected. He didn't speak. He smiled, a gentle, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and then his hands began to move. Fluidly, gracefully, Beck's fingers wove through the air, forming shapes, telling a story. Amelia's breath hitched. It was American Sign Language, unmistakably. But it wasn't the hesitant, almost academic ASL she used. It was natural, expressive, imbued with a cadence she instinctively understood as storytelling. He signed a question, his gaze unwavering, directed solely at Lily. Lily, who usually averted her eyes from strangers, who recoiled from unsolicited attention, found herself mesmerized. Her small head tilted, her ice cream cone momentarily forgotten. Amelia watched, frozen, her forgotten email glowing on her phone, as a flicker of something new, something hopeful, ignited in Lily's eyes. The man wasn't just signing words, he was signing emotion, a playful curiosity that seemed to transcend the silence. And he signed about the vibrant colors of the museum, about the taste of ice cream, about the funny shapes the clouds made in the sky visible through the window. He wasn't talking to her deafness, he was communicating with her, acknowledging her presence, inviting her into a shared moment. And then it happened. A slow, almost hesitant twitch at the corner of Lily's mouth. Then another. And then, as the man made a particularly exaggerated sign for a gigantic, silly monster, a burst of pure, unadulterated laughter bubbled up from Lily, silent to the world around them, but undeniably visible. Her eyes crinkled, her head tilted back slightly, and that magnificent, effulgent smile, the one captured in the photograph, blossomed across her face, radiating a joy so potent it almost brought Amelia to her knees. It was as if a dam had burst, releasing a torrent of light and warmth. This was the smile that had rendered Amelia Thorne, the formidable titan of industry, utterly speechless, a profound moment that had shattered her carefully constructed world with the force of an emotional tsunami. It was a smile that echoed through the silence of the cafe, a silent symphony of pure, unadulterated happiness. The man, seeing Lily's genuine delight, had simply smiled back, a soft, knowing warmth in his eyes, before offering a gentle, almost imperceptible nod to Amelia. He then picked up his tray and moved towards another table, melting back into the anonymous crowd as quickly as he had appeared. Amelia, still reeling, her mind struggling to process the monumental shift that had just occurred, could only watch him go. She hadn't even managed a coherent word, a thank you, or even a simple acknowledgement. All she had done was stare, her own mouth slightly agape, a profound sense of awe and bewildering gratitude washing over her. The ice cream had begun to melt down Lily's hand, forgotten, as her daughter, still faintly smiling, turned back to the window, a lightness in her posture Amelia hadn't seen in years. This single, profound interaction would irrevocably alter the course of their lives. and the formidable Amelia Thorne, for the first time in memory, felt a tremor of hope so potent it defied her carefully constructed reality. The unfolding story and the true depth of this connection had only just begun to reveal itself. The world had narrowed, collapsing into a singular, vibrating point of disbelief and profound, aching wonder. Evelyn, usually a fortress of composure, yet felt the ground beneath her shift, not subtly, but with a seismic tremor that threatened to crack her carefully constructed reality. Her daughter, Lily, usually a silhouette of quiet observation, a child who inhabited the periphery of boisterous childhoods, had just smiled. Not a polite curving of the lips, not a practiced social gesture, but a raw, unadulterated burst of joy that illuminated her entire face, a radiance Evelyn hadn't witnessed in years, perhaps never with such intensity. It was a smile born from true connection, from shared understanding, from a laughter that, though silent to Evelyn's ears, resonated deep within her very bones. Her gaze remained locked on the man, the single father whose hands had wrought this miracle. He was no longer just a fleeting figure in the background. He was the epicenter of her universe, a sudden, inexplicable gravitational pull. Evelyn, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech conglomerate, a woman whose days were meticulously planned, whose decisions steered the destinies of thousands, found herself utterly, completely paralyzed. Her mind, usually a rapid-fire processor of data and strategy, was a tangled knot of questions, observations, and a nascent, terrifying hope. Who was this man? Why did he possess such an effortless fluency in a language that had been a source of such profound struggle and quiet agony for her? Why, in this fleeting interaction, had he achieved what countless hours of therapy, specialized schools, and her own desperate, often clumsy attempts had failed to manifest? The park, vibrant moments before with the cacophony of children's play and distant city hum, had muted itself into a soft, indistinct blur. The sun, previously a pleasant warmth on her skin, now seemed to cast an almost ethereal glow around the man and Lily, isolating them in a bubble of intimate communication. Evelyn saw how his hands moved, not just quickly, but with a fluidity and grace that spoke of deep-seated knowledge, of practice and innate empathy. It wasn't just a translation of words, it was a conversation imbued with humor and warmth, a dance of expression that Lily followed with an alertness Evelyn rarely saw outside of focused tasks. Lily's eyes, usually guarded and a little distant, were wide and sparkling, mirroring the lively cadence of his signing. She leaned forward, her small frame radiating an eager engagement that pierced Evelyn's heart with a bittersweet pang. For years, Evelyn had wrestled with the chasm that separated her from her daughter. The initial diagnosis, delivered with clinical precision by specialists whose words felt like a death knell to her dreams of a normal life for Lily, had plunged her into a grief so profound it had threatened to consume her. She had thrown herself into solutions, into research, into assembling the best teams, the most innovative technologies, believing that sheer force of will and resources could bridge any gap. She had learned basic ASL, enough for daily communication, for urgent needs, for expressing love in simple, direct ways. But fluency, that deep, intuitive understanding that allowed for the nuances of humor, sarcasm, complex emotions, the spontaneity of a shared joke, that had always eluded her. Her schedule, an unrelenting tyrant, permitted only fragmented lessons, leaving her often feeling like a tourist in her own daughter's world. And Lily, in turn, had adapted. She was bright, incredibly intelligent, her mind a vibrant landscape of thoughts and observations. But her world was often a quiet one, her expressions muted, her joy contained, her frustrations sometimes manifesting in withdrawn silences. Evelyn had seen the longing in her daughter's eyes, the yearning for connection with peers, for the easy camaraderie she witnessed between hearing children. It was a pain Evelyn carried like a lead weight in her chest, a constant hum of guilt and inadequacy beneath the polished exterior of her corporate persona. She poured her love into tangible things, the best education, beautiful clothes, no enriching experiences, hoping that these would compensate for the intangible gap in their communication. But she knew with a certainty that gnawed at her that it was never enough. The true unburdened joy, the spontaneous laughter that bubbled forth from a child's soul, that had been a stranger to Lily, or at least a rare, fleeting guest. Until now. The man, oblivious to Evelyn's scrutiny, continued his silent dialogue. He pointed to something in the distance, perhaps a squirrel darting up a tree or a particularly vibrant flower, and Lily followed his gaze, then turned back to him, her hands moving in small, less polished signs, but signs that he clearly understood. He nodded, his smile gentle, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He wasn't just communicating, he was engaging. He was listening, truly listening, with his whole body, his whole being, to a child often overlooked, often misunderstood. It was a level of connection Evelyn had yearned for, prayed for, tirelessly worked towards, and yet had always felt frustratingly out of reach. A wave of complex emotions washed over her. Gratitude, yes, a searing, overwhelming gratitude for this moment of pure happiness for Lily, but also a sharp, bitter jealousy, an ache of self-reproach that someone else, a complete stranger, could so effortlessly unlock a part of her daughter she had struggled so desperately to access. Her CEO instincts, dormant for a precious few minutes, began to resurface, albeit warped by the intensity of the personal stake. She found herself analyzing him, dissecting his movements, his expressions, searching for any tell, any inconsistency. Was he a teacher, a volunteer? Why was he here, in this particular park, at this particular time? Was he aware of the impact he was having? He seemed utterly unself-conscious, simply present, simply kind. He was dressed casually but neatly, a simple t-shirt and jeans, not the tailored suits she was accustomed to seeing on men of significance. But there was an inherent dignity in his posture, a quiet strength that transcended attire. His hair was a little disheveled, as if he'd run his hands through it 100 times, and there was a faint stubble that hinted at the hurried mornings of a single parent. A single parent. The thought resonated with her own solitary journey, though their worlds seemed light years apart in every other aspect. Her gaze drifted to the child with him, a boy roughly Lily's age, perhaps a little older. The boy was playing on a nearby swing, absorbed in his own world, occasionally glancing back at his father and Lily with an easy, proprietary air. This wasn't a professional interaction then. This was a man with his own child, simply being. But why the fluency? The question hammered at the forefront of her mind, refusing to yield. Was his son deaf? No. The boy seemed perfectly engaged with the sounds of the park, his laughter ringing out freely when he pushed off the swing. This only deepened the mystery, adding another layer to the enigma of this man. Evelyn's initial shock began to crystallize into a more urgent need for information. Her corporate training kicked in. Observe, analyze, gather data. But this wasn't a quarterly report or a market trend. This was her daughter's happiness. A fragile, precious thing she hadn't known could exist in such an unbridled form. The thought of Lily's years of quietude, the suppressed emotions, the silent battles she fought daily in a hearing world, flooded Evelyn's memory. There was the time in kindergarten, when Lily had tried to explain a complex drawing to her teacher. Her frustrated signs misunderstood, leading to tears of silent despair. There were countless birthday parties where Lily had stood on the periphery, a small, elegant statue, observing the chaotic joy she couldn't fully partake in. Each memory was a sharp splinter in Evelyn's heart, a testament to her own perceived failures. And now, this stranger had in mere minutes cut through all of that, reaching Lily in a way Evelyn, despite all her love and resources, could not. A tremor ran through her, a mixture of awe and profound trepidation. What if this was a fleeting moment? And what if this man was simply passing through their lives, a brief comet of joy that would leave Lily yearning for more? The protectiveness of a mother surged, overriding her initial awe. Who was he, really? What were his intentions? The world, for all its beauty, was also full of complexities, of people with hidden motives. Her mind, ever the strategist, began to conjure scenarios, both hopeful and deeply cautious. Should she approach him? What would she say? Thank you for making my daughter smile. A feat I, her mother, have consistently failed to achieve? The thought was a bitter pill. Or should she observe further, gather more context, understand the nature of this unique connection before exposing herself, and more importantly, Lily, to a potentially fleeting interaction that might only exacerbate her daughter's sense of isolation once it ended? The man, sensing perhaps a shift in the energy around them, or simply in rhythm with his own child's developing play, signed something to Lily, a final exchange. Lily's face, still radiating warmth, held a slight trace of wistfulness as she nodded, her own small hands forming a simple thank you sign. He ruffled her hair, a paternal, unself-conscious gesture, and then turned his attention back to his son, who was now demanding his father's full attention to push him higher on the swing. The moment, potent and transformative, began to dissipate. Lily, still bathed in the afterglow of their interaction, lingered for a moment, watching him before slowly, almost reluctantly, turning to walk back towards where Evelyn stood, and still frozen, a silent sentinel in a world that had just been irrevocably altered. Evelyn wanted to move, to run, to intervene, to demand answers, to extend the moment, to capture it, bottle it, understand it. But she remained rooted, her heart thumping against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her breath caught in her throat. The questions swirling in her mind were a tempest. How could this be? What did it mean? Was this a sign? A literal sign of a path she had overlooked? A solution she had dismissed? The profound implication of the single dad's effortless connection with her deaf daughter was a revelation that would not only shake the foundations of her personal life, but also challenge every assumption she had ever made about her daughter's world and her own ability to navigate it. The smile, that brilliant, incandescent smile, they had not just lit up Lily's face, it had ignited a spark of hope and an inferno of desperate curiosity within Evelyn's own guarded heart. And she knew, with an unsettling certainty, that she could not, would not, let this moment fade into the anonymity of a forgotten park encounter. The silence between them as Lily slowly approached was suddenly heavier, charged with the weight of an unspoken, profound secret that only Evelyn carried. The silence that had descended upon Amelia was not the accustomed, sometimes comforting, often isolating silence of her daughter's world, but a new, profound void that had swallowed her own voice, her thoughts, her very capacity for movement. The soft chime of the cafe door, the distant murmur of other patrons, the clatter of porcelain, all faded into an indistinct hum and mere background noise to the seismic shift occurring within her. Her gaze remained riveted on Chloe, on that radiant, utterly unburdened smile, a sight so rare and precious it felt like a fragile, priceless artifact unearthed after decades of futile digging. It was a smile that didn't just curve her daughter's lips, but seemed to ignite a light deep within her eyes, a spark of pure, unadulterated joy that Amelia hadn't witnessed in years, perhaps not since Chloe was a toddler, before the quiet world truly began to assert its dominion. This wasn't the polite, practiced smile Chloe sometimes offered to strangers, or the gentle, affectionate smile she reserved for her mother during moments of shared warmth. This was raw, authentic, spontaneous delight, born of a connection that bypassed the chasm Amelia had always struggled to bridge, and the aroma of roasted coffee beans, usually a comforting presence, now felt distant, almost alien, as Amelia stood frozen beside their small table, her half-eaten pastry forgotten. The bustling cafe, usually a testament to the vibrant pulse of the city she so expertly navigated in her professional life, had transformed into a still life, a stage upon which a miracle had just unfolded, leaving her, the supposed master of her universe, utterly inert. A wave of complex emotions, sharp and dissonant, crashed over her. Guilt, searing and immediate. For every hurried glance, every distracted thought, every moment she had felt inadequate in reaching Chloe. Shame, for her own inability to evoke such pure happiness. Of fierce protectiveness, a primordial urge to understand the source of this joy and perhaps to hoard it, to possess it for Chloe and for herself. But beneath it all, a fragile, nascent hope, terrifying in its vulnerability, began to unfurl its tentative leaves in the barren landscape of her often weary heart. For years, Amelia had wrestled with the intractable problem of Chloe's world, a world she could observe but never fully inhabit, a language she spoke but never with the fluidity and inherent grace that seemed to flow so effortlessly from the hands of the stranger across from them. She had invested in the best schools, the most innovative therapies, dedicated interpreters, but the true, deep connection, the kind that blossomed spontaneously and joyously, had remained elusive, a whispered promise always just out of reach. Who was this man, whose hands spoke a language more eloquent than any words Amelia had ever heard? What ancient wellspring of empathy and understanding did he draw from, to perceive and connect with her daughter in a way that defied all Amelia's well-intentioned yet often clumsy efforts? And what did this moment, so fleeting yet so profoundly impactful, mean for Chloe, for Amelia, and for the carefully constructed, often isolated world they inhabited together? The questions swirled unanswered, creating a vortex of urgent curiosity and hesitant anticipation within her. Amelia's mind, usually a finely tuned machine processing intricate business strategies, contract negotiations, and market analyses with surgical precision, felt sluggish, almost paralytic. The image of Chloe's hands, tiny and hesitant at first, mirroring the man's fluid gestures, then blossoming into a more confident, animated dance, replayed in her mind's eye. She remembered the early days after Chloe's diagnosis, the endless audiology appointments, the specialists with their gentle, often sterile pronouncements. "She'll learn to cope," they'd said. "She's resilient." But coping wasn't living, not truly. Amelia had thrown herself into learning American Sign Language, with the same ferocious dedication she applied to her career, often staying up late, poring over textbooks, practicing signs in front of a mirror until her fingers ached. She wanted to bridge the gap, to be Chloe's voice, her ears, her connection to a world that seemed determined to leave her on its periphery. Yet, despite her diligence, her ASL always felt different. Functional, yes, expressive, certainly, but it lacked the innate rhythm, the almost poetic flow she now witnessed in the stranger's hands, and it lacked the nuanced empathy that seemed to emanate from him, wrapping Chloe in a cocoon of understanding. When Amelia signed, she translated thoughts, needs, instructions. When this man signed, he seemed to translate feelings, emotions, the very essence of shared human experience. And Chloe, her observant, often withdrawn Chloe, responded to it with an openness Amelia rarely saw. The man, a single father himself by the looks of the small boy, now contentedly coloring in a nearby booth, possessed an unassuming aura. His clothes were simple, practical, perhaps a little worn, a stark contrast to Amelia's impeccably tailored power suits. His face, etched with lines that spoke of responsibility and perhaps a quiet weariness, was nonetheless kind, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he communicated with Chloe. He wasn't performing. No, he was simply being. And in that authentic presence, he had unlocked something profound within Chloe. Amelia felt a tremor run through her. Her world, usually so meticulously ordered and predictable, felt suddenly unmoored. She, the CEO of Atherton Holdings, a titan in the tech industry, a woman who commanded respect and wielded immense influence, found herself utterly disarmed by a casual interaction in a coffee shop. All her achievements, all her accolades, felt hollow in the face of that one perfect smile on her daughter's face. What good was building an empire if she couldn't even elicit such simple, profound joy from the one person who mattered most? The question hung heavy in the air, a silent indictment. She remembered the countless birthday parties where Chloe would stand slightly apart, observing and smiling politely, but never fully immersing herself in the boisterous play. The school events where other parents would exchange knowing glances, a subtle pity in their eyes that Amelia fiercely resented. The quiet evenings at home, where Amelia would try to initiate conversations through sign, only for Chloe's responses to be concise, factual, rarely venturing into the realm of imaginative play or abstract thought. Chloe was smart, incredibly intelligent, her mind a vibrant landscape. But connecting to that landscape, truly exploring it, often felt like navigating a dense fog. Now, however, the fog had lifted. Not through Amelia's efforts, but through the spontaneous kindness of a stranger. The man's fingers moved with a graceful precision, telling a story, perhaps, or asking a question that transcended simple words. Chloe's eyes, though usually watchful, were now sparkling, her own small hands responding with an almost breathless eagerness. It was a dialogue, not just a translation. It was a shared moment of humanity, pure and unfiltered. Amelia's professional instincts, though temporarily overridden by raw emotion, began to stir. She observed the man, his posture relaxed, his attention completely absorbed by Chloe. There was no pretense, no agenda. He simply saw Chloe, not as the deaf girl, but as a child worthy of engaging, worthy of delight. This profound respect, unspoken yet undeniably present in his every gesture, struck Amelia with the force of a physical blow. She realized with a startling clarity that this was precisely what she had unknowingly been searching for, not just for Chloe, but perhaps for herself. A genuine connection, unburdened by the weight of expectations or the complexities of the hearing world. She thought of the countless corporate meetings where she had to fight for every inch of ground, every concession. The relentless pressure, the strategic maneuvering, the constant analysis of human behavior for tactical advantage. Her world was one of calculated risks and measured responses. This man operated on an entirely different plane, one of intuitive empathy and uncalculated kindness, and it yielded a richer dividend than any stock market return Amelia had ever seen. The conversation between Chloe and the man continued, a silent ballet unfolding before Amelia's astonished eyes. Chloe giggled, a soft, breathy sound that was music to Amelia's ears, a sound she hadn't heard in weeks, perhaps months. The man chuckled too, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to resonate with the warmth of his smile. He leaned forward slightly, his posture inviting, his gaze unwavering, making Chloe feel like the most important person in the room. Amelia suddenly became acutely aware of her own rigid posture. Her shoulders tensed, her hands clasped tightly. How often had she conveyed her own stress, her own anxieties to Chloe, without even realizing it? How much of Chloe's quietness was a reflection of Amelia's own, often overwhelmed state? The thought was a bitter pill. She, the powerful CEO, was so adept at projecting strength and confidence in the boardroom, but perhaps woefully inadequate in the delicate art of simply being present for her daughter. The silence around Amelia thickened, yet it was not empty. It was filled with the reverberations of Chloe's laughter, the silent eloquence of the man's hands, and the tumultuous, accelerating beat of Amelia's own heart. A heart that, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, dared to feel something akin to unadulterated hope. She was still speechless, but the paralysis was beginning to wane, replaced by a surge of purposeful energy she hadn't felt since closing her first major deal. The man, sensing perhaps that their brief, beautiful interlude was drawing to a natural close, gently signed a farewell to Chloe. His gestures were slow, deliberate, a tender punctuation mark at the end of their shared moment. Chloe's smile, though still brilliant, softened into a look of wistful contentment. She signed back, a small, polite farewell, her eyes still sparkling with the lingering joy. The man then stood up, giving a quick, almost imperceptible nod to his own child, who was now gathering his crayons. He glanced briefly and, for the first time, directly at Amelia. His eyes, though meeting hers, held no judgment, no recognition, just a fleeting, polite acknowledgement of another parent in the vicinity. He hadn't realized, couldn't possibly have realized, the profound earthquake he had just unleashed within her carefully constructed world. He simply turned, taking his son's hand, and began to walk towards the exit, his form receding, threatening to carry with him the secret of Chloe's smile, the catalyst for Amelia's awakening. The window of opportunity, the chance to understand, to thank, to perhaps even beg for more of this inexplicable magic, was closing rapidly. Amelia felt a desperate urge to move, to speak, to stop him, but the words were still caught in her throat, a dam holding back a torrent of unspoken emotion. She had to act, and she had to act now, before this precious, ephemeral connection vanished completely, leaving her and Chloe once again in the familiar, quiet solace of their incomplete world. The decision, sharp and urgent, formed in her mind, overriding years of ingrained corporate decorum and personal reservation. The CEO felt an inexplicable tremor ripple through her. It wasn't the usual adrenaline surge of a high-stakes negotiation or the icy grip of corporate betrayal. No, this was something far more primal, a seismic shift deep within her own being. The small, silent, yet utterly incandescent smile on her daughter's face was a revelation, a shattering of the carefully constructed barriers that had defined her existence for so long. It was the smile she had yearned for, prayed for, agonized over, yet had never quite been able to elicit in its full, radiant glory. And it was there now, blooming under the gentle, understanding gaze of a man she barely knew, a man who, moments ago, she had mentally relegated to the status of just another applicant. Her jaw, usually set in a firm, authoritative line, now hung slightly agape, a silent testament to the magnitude of her shock. Her meticulously composed features, honed over decades to betray no weakness, no emotion that wasn't strategically advantageous, were in complete disarray. Her eyes, usually sharp and discerning, were wide, glistening, blurring the edges of the room, the polished mahogany table, the sleek leather chairs, the city sprawl outside the panoramic window, all faded into an indistinct background. All that remained stark and vivid was the tableau before her, her daughter, luminous with joy, and the single father whose hands continued their silent, rhythmic dance, weaving a tapestry of understanding that had, until this moment, been a closed book to her. A profound, almost agonizing wave of shame washed over her. Here she was, a titan of industry, capable of orchestrating multi-million-dollar deals, commanding respect from global leaders, yet utterly, devastatingly impotent in the face of her own daughter's most fundamental need, to be seen, to be heard, to be understood in her own unique language. She had outsourced tutors, therapists, specialists, all brilliant, all well-intentioned, but none had achieved this. This visceral connection that transcended mere instruction. This man, a stranger, had bridged a chasm that she, the girl's own mother, had allowed to widen over years, filled with the debris of her own ambitions and unspoken fears. The silence in the room, previously punctuated by the subtle hum of the air conditioning and the distant city murmur, now felt heavy, charged with an unspoken truth. It was a silence that spoke volumes, echoing the unspoken pleas of a child, the silent struggles of a parent, and the sudden thunderous awakening of another. The father, oblivious to the seismic shift he had triggered, continued to sign, a gentle narrative flowing from his fingertips, translating the world into shapes and movements that brought pure delight to the little girl. He wasn't performing. He was simply being utterly present, entirely dedicated to the moment, a stark contrast to the CEO's often fragmented attention, perpetually pulled between boardrooms and balance sheets. Then, as if a dam had burst within her, the CEO felt a tear trace a path down her cheek. It was hot, stinging, a physical manifestation of a dam holding back years of repressed emotion. Guilt, yes, but also a nascent, fragile hope. Her daughter's laughter, a sound she hadn't heard with such unrestrained joy in what felt like an eternity, was the sweetest melody. It wasn't the tentative, polite giggle she sometimes managed for company, but a full-bodied, uninhibited peal that resonated deep within her chest. This was her child truly, utterly happy. Her gaze fixed on the father, a man whose resume she had barely glanced at, whose interview she had considered a formality. She saw not just an applicant, but a profound empathy, a dedication that went beyond mere professional requirement. His hands, though calloused and worn from what she now vaguely remembered as a background in construction, moved with a surprising grace, a fluidity born of genuine practice and understanding. It wasn't just a language, it was a conversation, a bond. He finally finished his story, a simple tale about a mischievous squirrel, and the little girl clapped her hands together, a burst of energy emanating from her small frame. She looked up at her mother, her eyes still sparkling, and then signed something quickly, excitedly. The CEO could only recognize a few isolated signs. Squirrel. Funny. He. But then the father, sensing her incomprehension, gently relayed, she said, "He's the funniest. He understands me." The words hit the CEO with the force of a physical blow. Heck, he understands me. It wasn't just about language. It was about validation, recognition, belonging. It was everything her daughter craved, everything the CEO, in her frantic pursuit of providing a comfortable life, had inadvertently failed to truly give. She cleared her throat, a sound rough and uncharacteristic, and pushed herself up from her chair. Her legs felt unsteady as if they had forgotten how to bear her weight. She walked around the table, her eyes still locked on the father, a new kind of respect, awe even, etched on her face. Her voice, when it finally came, was a mere whisper, stripped of all its usual authority. Mr. Mr. Davies, she began, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. I am speechless. She wasn't just saying it, she was it. Her usual articulate precision had abandoned her. He looked up, and a hint of concern in his eyes, perhaps wondering if he had overstepped, if his spontaneous connection with her daughter had been inappropriate. Is everything all right, ma'am? He signed, his voice gentle. She shook her head slowly, tears now flowing freely, unbidden, unashamed. She knelt beside her daughter, pulling the small girl into a fierce hug. She buried her face in her daughter's hair, inhaling the sweet, familiar scent, and murmured, my darling girl. I'm so sorry I didn't learn." The words were muffled, raw. The little girl, startled but sensing the profound emotion, hugged her mother back, patting her shoulder. Then, the CEO looked up at Mr. Davies, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes alight with a newfound clarity. "Mr. Davies," she repeated, her voice gaining a little strength, you have just done more for my daughter in 20 minutes than all my resources combined have managed in years. You've given her back her voice, her joy. You've given me back my daughter, in a way I didn't even realize she was missing." She stood up, composed herself with a shuddering breath, and reached out a hand. "I don't know what to say, but I know this. Your application is no longer just for a project manager position. It's for something far more crucial. I need you. My daughter needs you. Our company needs the kind of understanding, the kind of empathy you possess." Mr. Davies, clearly overwhelmed, started to protest. "Ma'am, I love working with children, and my own daughter is deaf, you see. It was natural for me to learn. It's just part of who I am." The CEO's eyes widened further. "Your daughter's deaf?" she asked, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. That's why you understand. Why you're so fluent." A fresh wave of admiration, tinged with a painful understanding of his own struggles, washed over her. This wasn't just skill. It was lived experience. It was love. "Yes, ma'am," he confirmed, a quiet dignity in his posture. "She's 5. We've been signing since she was born. It's how we connect, how she navigates the world." He paused, a faint, sad smile touching his lips. "It's not always easy, being a single dad, trying to make ends meet, ensuring she has everything she needs. But her happiness, her ability to communicate, that's everything." The CEO took a deep breath, her decision crystallizing with every passing second. "Mr. Davies," she said, her voice now firm, authoritative once more, but imbued with a warmth he hadn't heard before. "I'm not just offering you a job. I'm offering you a partnership, a future. I want you to join my executive team, not as a project manager, but as a special advisor for inclusion and communication. Your first task will be to help me set up a program within this company, not just for our employees, but for the wider community, to promote sign language, to bridge these gaps. And your salary will reflect the profound value I now recognize in you. She paused, then added, her gaze softening, and for your daughter, Mr. Davies, consider her tuition, her therapy, anything she needs, fully covered. My company will ensure she has every opportunity, because you have given my daughter something priceless. His eyes, mirroring her own earlier, were now wide with disbelief, then gratitude, then the unmistakable glimmer of tears. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He simply nodded, a profound, heartfelt nod. The CEO smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that had been absent from her features for far too long. She turned back to her daughter, who was now looking between the two adults, sensing the dramatic shift in atmosphere. My love, she signed slowly, awkwardly, her fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar movements. Mommy will learn. Mommy will learn for you. Her daughter's eyes widened. Then her face broke into the most radiant, hopeful smile the CEO had ever witnessed. It was a smile that promised a future, a bridge finally being built, not just for her, but for countless others. The CEO knew in that transformative moment that her life and the trajectory of her company had irrevocably changed. In the pursuit of profit and power, while still important, now had a deeper, more profound purpose: connection, understanding, and the simple, universal joy of a child's unhindered smile. The world had been a silent place for her daughter for too long, and for her too, in a different way. But now, with the unexpected arrival of a single father's sign language, the music had begun to play. It was a melody of empathy, a symphony of inclusion, and she, the once speechless CEO, was ready to conduct it, not with the cold logic of business, but with the warm, open heart of a mother. She looked at Mr. Davies, then at her daughter, a silent promise passing between them. The journey had just begun, but the path ahead, illuminated by a child's radiant smile, felt clearer, brighter, and infinitely more meaningful than any she had ever dared to imagine. It was a testament to the power of seeing, truly seeing another human being, beyond the resume, beyond the expectations, to the heart of what truly mattered. And for that, she would be eternally grateful.